Police and security guards in Belgium were caught flat-footed today by a cowardly sneak attack on one of the world's wealthiest men. The target was Microsoft Chairman Bill Gates, arriving for a meeting with community leaders. Watch what happens when a team of hitmen meet him first with a pie in the face. Gates was momentarily and understandably shaken, but he was not injured.
By 1998, Bill Gates stood at the pinnacle of success, the world's richest man and the founder of one of the most successful and powerful companies in American history. Despite all his success, Gates wasn't seen as a genius or a hero. He was feared, sued, and even compared to a dictator. In this video, you will see exactly how he cheated and manipulated the tech world in order to win at all costs, and bizarrely of all, how he embraced his villain arc, creating internal company videos where he openly mocked his competitors. Stick around to find out how he tried to rebrand himself from this terrible reputation, spending billions of dollars and 2 decades to build a new, positive public image, just to destroy it all overnight and end up being one of the most hated people in the world again.
Homer, Bill Gates is here.
Bill Gates? Billionaire computer nerd Bill Gates? Oh my god, oh my god.
Mr. Simpson?
You don't look so rich.
Don't let the haircut fool you. I'm exceedingly wealthy. Your internet ad was brought to my attention, but I can't figure out what, if anything, CompuGlobal HyperMegaNet does. So rather than risk competing with you, I've decided simply to buy you out.
I reluctantly accept your proposal.
Well, everyone always does. Buy 'em out, boys!
Hey, what the hell's going on?
Oh, I didn't get rich by writing a lot of checks.
The resentment towards Bill Gates really began in 1983. At this point in time, Microsoft's MS-DOS was one of the most popular operating systems in the world. It achieved this dominant position mainly by being IBM's official operating system provider. IBM at the time was the largest computer company in the world. So Microsoft, realizing the strong position it found itself in, started to weaponize its market dominance. In 1983, Microsoft began giving PC manufacturers steep discounts if they paid Microsoft a licensing fee for every computer they shipped, regardless of whether that machine actually included MS-DOS or not. This meant if a PC maker shipped 1,000 machines and only 600 had MS-DOS, they'd still pay Microsoft for all 1,000 machines. If they wanted to install a competitor's OS, they would essentially be paying twice, once to Microsoft and once to the competitor. This tactic gave Microsoft an unfair advantage. Microsoft knew that almost every PC manufacturer would choose to sign the agreement because Microsoft's powerful position as the official operating system of the IBM PC gave it immense power in the operating system market. Compaq, Dell, and smaller PC manufacturers were stuck in a corner. They wanted flexibility, but the financial penalty was too high if they didn't go all in with Microsoft. They would have to pay higher licensing fees. Many manufacturers resented Microsoft for this, but they were too dependent on Microsoft to fight back. Because of its ruthless business practices, Microsoft's operating system went from being a major player in the operating system market to having a full-blown monopoly, suffocating rival OSs by making them economically unviable. Microsoft's dominant position soon came under fire. On January 19, 1983, Apple released the Lisa computer, a graphical user interface-based computer. The release of the Lisa marked a paradigm shift in the young personal computer industry. Prior to its release, nearly all computers ran operating systems that were command line based, relying on users to type in commands to complete tasks. The Lisa changed all of that, creating a more intuitive and natural graphical user interface that replaced long complicated commands with mouse movements and clicks. When it released, it was way ahead of its time and it caught Microsoft off guard. While the Lisa itself wasn't a commercial success, it demonstrated clearly that the future of computing was going to be graphical, and some companies caught on quite early. VisiCorp released VisiOn in 1983, which was an early version of a graphical user interface designed for the IBM PC. IBM itself had created TopView, a text-based windowing environment designed to make MS-DOS more powerful and user-friendly for business users. Microsoft was in trouble. It didn't have a GUI of its own and was in danger of being left behind. So rather than wait and see how things unfolded, at Comdex 1983, Bill Gates took to the stage and unveiled Windows 1.0. He promised it would ship by April 1984. Windows was supposed to be Microsoft's answer to the slew of newly released graphical OSs, but there was one problem: Windows didn't exist. By April 1984, there was no product to ship. Microsoft repeatedly delayed and missed shipping dates. Internally, Windows was barely functional. Developers at Microsoft were struggling to retrofit a GUI on top of MS-DOS, which was never designed to have a GUI. But Bill Gates' announcement was not meant to create hype for an upcoming product. Rather, it was meant to cast doubt on the product already on the market. Microsoft's announcement alone was enough to dissuade PC manufacturers and software developers from working with rival platforms because they expected Windows to become the standard. The announcement effectively killed any first-mover advantage that competing GUIs had. Gates' actions would later get him a lot of hate because when Windows finally shipped in 1985, it was a massive disappointment. It was clunky, slow, and barely functional. Even Microsoft internally admitted it was more of a tech demo than a usable product, but the damage was done. Journalists would later call Microsoft's deceptive strategy a PR mirage that gave Microsoft a head start through vaporware. Real resentment for Gates and Microsoft began to grow, not only from its competitors, but its customers too, who felt misled and manipulated by Microsoft. But despite Microsoft's GUI objectively being worse than its competitors, Microsoft began leveraging the dominant position of MS-DOS by bundling Windows with MS-DOS licenses to PC manufacturers. It was the same per-processor logic as before, making it financially irrational for PC makers to support competing GUI OSs. This strategy meant that by the late 90s, what was once a terrible operating system that was essentially vaporware had come to be the industry standard GUI with a near monopoly on the market. Microsoft's ruthless strategies were so successful that Microsoft began making internal videos within the company to underline how its aim was to eliminate all its competitors.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a plan! Now, if this global reinvention is to work, there might be a few competitors that are unfortunately eliminated! Oopsie!
Oh, behave.
By the mid-90s, Gates was deeply resented by former employees of companies he had ruthlessly bankrupted, rivals who knew their days were numbered, software developers who had been burned by Gates' empty promises, and his own customers who felt cheated by the way Bill Gates used Microsoft's powerful market position to negotiate deals with harsh terms. But public sentiment about Gates was still largely positive. This sentiment, however, began changing. By the mid-90s, the internet had amassed millions of connected users worldwide, and it began redefining what a personal computer was. Microsoft was caught off guard by how quickly the internet went from the fringes of society to becoming mainstream. The internet was platform agnostic, meaning it didn't matter what type of device you were using or the operating system you used, everyone had access to the same internet. This posed a threat to Microsoft because people were increasingly buying computers to only use the internet. Because the internet didn't require a specific operating system, it had the power to make Windows as a whole obsolete. The internet revolution was led by Netscape, which was by far the most popular web browser. By 1995, it had over 10 million users, which accounted for 70% of all users using the internet. It made websites on the internet far more useful and graphical. Netscape was playing a huge role in building out the internet ecosystem. Netscape was paving the way for a world in which all applications ran seamlessly on any device, regardless of an operating system. This would free developers from being locked in the Windows ecosystem and empower them to build applications that run on all platforms. This would effectively destroy Windows' moat, and Gates was not going to let his empire crumble without a fight. In 1995, Microsoft released Windows 95. Initial copies of Windows 95 didn't ship with the browser, but after Microsoft announced its new browser, Internet Explorer, all subsequent copies of Windows came bundled with Internet Explorer. This effectively cut off Netscape's air supply, because for users to use Netscape, they first had to figure out how to install it. But now those with Windows had a browser that came pre-installed, meaning they did not need to waste money and time buying and installing Netscape. Microsoft took it a step further. In many cases, PC manufacturers were given steep discounts on Windows licenses in exchange for browser exclusivity. If they resisted, Microsoft threatened to revoke their licenses entirely. Within just a few years, Microsoft's tactics caused Netscape's market share to plummet from over 90% to below 10%. By the late 90s, the Netscape web browser was effectively dead, but the death of Netscape created real resentment within the American public. Netscape Navigator was one of the first programs that made the internet usable and exciting for millions of Americans. For many, Netscape was the internet in the mid to late 90s, so when Netscape began to die off and Microsoft's Internet Explorer was suddenly on every PC, people noticed and resented the forced switch. This created a lot of public anger. It was no longer just developers, competitors, and Microsoft's own customers that hated them, but all of America was now united in their hate for Microsoft. By this point in time, aggrieved competitors had filed numerous lawsuits and sought the help of the US government to intervene. And with public pressure mounting, the US government ended up bringing charges against Microsoft, accusing it of being an illegal monopoly. The DOJ summoned Gates to a deposition where they questioned him about his various ruthless business tactics. During the deposition, Gates came off as evasive, arrogant, and frustratingly uncooperative. His behavior during the trial was so bad that its footage would be used in open court to show how defensive and unlikable Bill Gates was. Microsoft, for its part, tried as much as possible not to look like a monopoly leading up to the trial, but the problem was that Microsoft, by its own doing, barely had any competitors they could point to that would prove that they were not a monopoly. Their best effort to prove they were not a monopoly was when they rescued an almost bankrupt Apple by infusing $150 million into the company to help keep it afloat. In the end, Gates would settle with the DOJ in November 2001 and his empire would remain intact. I made a whole video about the bizarre situation of how he kept his monopoly because of Bill Clinton's failings. Be sure to watch it after this one if you haven't already. Gates, by the early 2000s, had become the wealthiest man in the world and the leader of arguably the most powerful company in the world. But still, he was missing something money couldn't buy: the love of the masses. Well, as it turns out, money could try buying it. In the early 2000s, Gates stepped down from his role as CEO of Microsoft and started the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The foundation focused on global health, vaccines, education, and poverty alleviation. Through his foundation, Gates began rebranding himself from a monopolist, smug billionaire to a global savior. In the 2000s, Gates began appearing on 60 Minutes, TED Talks, and in news profiles as a man trying to save the world. His foundation spent millions on PR and media training, helping reshape his public image, and it worked. Throughout the 2010s, he was seen as a moral billionaire, helping to make the world a better place, donating over $60 billion of his personal fortune to his foundation. But this meticulously crafted positive public image would be undone when it was revealed that Gates had met with Jeffrey Epstein multiple times between 2011 and 2014, after Epstein had been convicted as a sex offender. To the public, this was a bombshell. Gates' carefully crafted image of a moral billionaire that he had spent 20 years building vanished overnight. Reminiscent of the 90s, he became one of the most hated figures of the early 2020s. People began revisiting his old reputation: the cold monopolist, the arrogant genius, the man who always seemed to operate in ethical gray zones. A ruthless reputation that he had tried so hard to bury under humanitarian and philanthropic work started resurfacing, and Gates' public image has not been able to recover ever since, leaving bare the true face of a man who built an empire using fear, manipulation, and bullying. That's the story of how Bill Gates was the most hated man of the 90s, then became one of the most beloved people of the 2010s, just to return to being hated again. Thank you for watching.